Welcome, friends, to the second live YouTube broadcast about another unique human star that you will meet in a moment. But before we do that, let me take you on a very short journey so that you can know more about our new marketplace to meet human star. It's called dayoutwith.com. It's a new website to help you spend a day out with a human star. It's a place to talk to human stars, meet over cupcakes, have fun outdoors, meet virtually like we are doing right now. And this is sponsored by Indian Environment Network. The network has around 2,000 organizations, and we have like 6,000 members now. So it's a huge network, and we want to showcase each one of them on this human star network because yes, each one of them are a human star. Be the change, feel the change, as Gandhiji said. So you can go ahead, find human stars at www.dayoutwith.com. What we are doing today is meeting Suresh Ediga. Suresh, a human star for this episode, describes himself as a son, husband, and a father of two beautiful kids. His simple belief is that his responsibility towards society is as important as his responsibility towards his kids and families. You can live a meaningful life and a happy life only if you can balance both the responsibilities. Suresh has been volunteering for the last 15 years, doing amazing work, right from collecting funds for the farmers in distress, learning and nurturing stories of innovation, and volunteering for numerous causes, too many for this broadcast. What moved me most was how he was working to nurture the second generation and with the same values and awareness about social issues that he imbibed himself. So let me first congratulate him on this amazing book that he wrote today, You, Me, and a Story, The Art of Socially Relevant Bedtime Stories. So friends, welcome again. I'm Chandra Kishore, founder of Indian Environment Network. And today I'm really excited to bring you our second human star, Suresh Ediga. Suresh, welcome to our second episode now. I will just dive right in. You are an investment bank, work in New York. How do you find time? What is social responsibility that is so important to you?
First of all, thank you very much, CK, for giving me this opportunity and to talk about the book and also about social responsibility, as you rightly put it. So, you want me to use a headset?
No, that's fine. Yeah, I think everyone can see you totally fine.
Okay.
No problem.
So I think finding time is always going to be a challenge if we think that it is something out of the ordinary or something extra that we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But if it becomes a part of our life, our daily life, then it does not feel that we have to find this time. Similar to how we find time to do our daily puja, like
Right.
we go to the temple.
Right.
We take the kids to the park. We take them to the nearby whatever classes they have to go to. We do so many things.
Mm.
We feel that it is part of our daily life. It is our responsibility towards our kids, our family. And social responsibility to me also is along the same lines where I strongly feel that it is part of our daily life. It should be part of our daily life because at the end of the day, we are what our society makes us.
Yeah, but like
Right?
social responsibility, why should it be an individual's responsibility?
Well, I would question why not. So I'll give you a simple example. I came to the US way back in 2000
Mm-hmm.
to do my masters, and I could not afford the education back then. So my father had to take out a loan
Right.
So he goes to the bank, and because my father has a sort of a well-paid job, and so the bank did not have any difficulty in giving me that loan.
Right.
And thanks to that loan, now I'm here, and I've managed to do whatever little for my family and whatnot. But had not the bank been there, which is part of our society, because the bank obviously operates on the money that other people pull in,
Mm-hmm.
right? The bank is not giving this money out of their own pockets. It is the money that we all pull in, that money, and there's a system for that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so many people have also helped me shape with my thought process, with my daily lifestyle, and that's all because of the people living in our own community, people living in our own society.
Yeah, and that's amazing thing that you are doing. I see that you have been featured in lot of papers and magazines and everywhere. And Hindu recently featured you on because you were doing some fundraising for the farmers. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. As you mentioned, I've been volunteering for almost 15 years now, from one cause to the other. And what
Mhm.
I've found is all these causes are interconnected.
Right.
There's no one cause which can be looked at in isolation. And over the years, I've begun to realize that the rural economy is completely agriculture based, and yet it is also very much neglected. So we started seriously doing some work with the farmers, trying to help the farmers and taking on various initiatives. And as part of those initiatives is how we started raising funds. And I think a couple of years ago, we raised almost about 23 lakhs or something within a month's time
That's
using the
great.
social media platform.
Yes.
And that money was used to help, over 100 suicide families with their immediate relief in Haryana and in Vidarbha, and also allowed us to take on other projects. So that's a story why the Hindu sort of covered the organization and also the work that we have been doing as part of that.
Yeah, that's amazing that you are doing. Uh, let's dive right in today. Your wonderful book is about social issues being told as bedtime stories. Why social issues? Why did you start with that?
I mean, so if you think about it, what seems to be happening now, it happened with me when I was a kid. When we go to school, we are given a particular subject to talk about, to read about, and we are already sort of defined what is our scope of learning within this, four walls of what we call as our education system. And beyond that, we never get a chance to reflect on what is happening within our society. And to give you a more concrete example that we can all relate to,
Mhm.
the schools and the education system makes us engineers, doctors, lawyers, and whoever, right?
Right.
But the the same school does not give us enough empathy, create that compassion to solve the problems that we see in our own neighborhood.
Right.
To the point where we are engineers, but our roads have potholes in them. We are doctors, but we have homeless people suffering and dying on the streets.
Hmm.
We are lawyers, but we have people struggling to retain their own houses, their own property. So it's almost like we are educated, and at the same time, we are being disconnected from our society. And that disconnect has been increasing over the years, and which is where I saw the storytelling as a means to plug that gap. And while kids are getting exposed to different kind of things from the parents and their teachers, I felt using the storytelling as a way to bridge that gap and get the kids closer to what is happening within our own society.
Great. What kind of stories are included in this book?
So in this particular book, I have stories ranging from rural innovators, for example,
Hmm.
to the issues of pollution that has happened, that
Hmm.
are happening around us. One concrete story was there is a lake in Bangalore,
Hmm.
which has these poisonous gases and chemicals
Hmm.
actually floating on the lake as white foam. So if anybody walks in, it looks like a dreamy, snowy lake somewhere out in Switzerland.
Okay.
And this foam is actually flying across the road, and people actually just
Mhm.
sort of either stop taking that road, they just
Mhm.
completely ignore it to the point where now it has become such a big problem. So I introduce them to this. I talk about the Bhopal gas tragedy, which
Mhm.
has happened in 84 and yet continues to be a disaster.
Right.
So I have all these. I think I have 11 or 12 stories, but I have more editions that I'm planning on getting this book to talk about um, issues and introduce them to these sort of concepts.
Right. And I understand that your inspiration were your two kids, and that's how you created the stories for them. So, can you tell me
Right.
more about your two kids?
So my daughter, she's now 10 years old, and my
Right.
son is 8 years old.
Uh-huh.
It all started with my daughter when she was about 2 or 2.5 years old.
Mhm.
And she would not go to bed without someone accompanying her to the bed and putting them to the bed, as normal with any other kid.
Right.
Uh, because the moment I turn on the light, she'd be distracted, and it was very difficult to put her to bed. So I was just talking about in general about my childhood, about
Mhm.
what happened on that day. I soon found out that the kid, my daughter, was being very receptive to those things.
Right.
She was asking questions. She was being proactive, and that led me down the path of talking about other things that I'm actually working on, all my non-profit work, all the volunteering work. And I
Mhm.
started telling them as small story that she can understand,
Mhm.
using the characters that she knows about. Like Dora was a big show that she would love watching. So
Mhm.
I used to introduce Dora in my stories, and how Dora, for example, helped clean up the Bangalore Lake, or
Right.
how Dora would react when she was around the Bhopal gas tragedy.
Mhm.
So I was able to weave these characters, and pretty soon my daughter started setting the context for the stories. She would
Okay.
say, "Daddy, today tell me about the story with the forest, and with Mowgli getting lost in the forest."
Mhm.
And I would talk about deforestation. I would use Mowgli, I would use forest, and I would talk about deforestation.
Right.
So we started building these kind of stories, and pretty soon I found out that to make it more interesting, I named my characters as, for example, very popular with my daughter. She still remembers even after 8 long years.
Mhm.
Silly Milly Killy. Silly Milly Killy were three friends,
Okay.
and she still remembers those characters, and she still remembers some of the stories that I told using those characters.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Can you take me through just one story deeply into it, and let's see how our audience and everyone can relate to that and work with their own children and tell them those bedtime stories?
Sure. One recent story that I told my son, 8 years old, and he's into cars.
Uh-huh.
Relate to it. He loves the Disney Cars, the Cars movie that came out. The McQueen and Mater are his two favorite cars.
Okay.
Uh, so this, I told this at the time when there was this huge crisis, humanitarian crisis in Syria.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Aleppo was one city which was getting bombarded everywhere, and the kids there were, reaching out. And I saw a video of a little kid who was saying, there are bombs flying everywhere. Somebody come and rescue me. I started told this story to my son, saying one day Mater and McQueen get a request from this kid in Aleppo to come visit them.
Okay.
So McQueen and Mater go on a road trip, and they ended up going to Aleppo. McQueen, the Disney cars have this a feature where the cars can change their colors. So I used that, and I said, listen, McQueen and Mater could not go out in the daylight because there are bombs everywhere. So they changed the colors to match the sunlight, and that way they use camouflage. And so my son was actually being responsive to that, and he would also add his own variations to the story. And by the end of the story, my son got the idea that I was trying to sort of drive into, which was that the situation in Aleppo was something that demanded everybody's attention and focus. So I told this story about a month ago, and he still keeps asking me if the kids in Aleppo are safe, whether they are going to the school, whether they are going to the parks. So, I introduced him to Aleppo, where Syria was, what the situation was, using McQueen and Mader.
Amazing. What was the reaction of your son on that?
Yeah, I mean, he definitely loved the fact that there was McQueen and Mader in the stories. So
Uh-huh.
he wanted more me to tell like the part two of that story. So which did a sequel of that story, and he also asking me, if the kids in Aleppo were now safe, if they were going to the school, like I said earlier, if they were playing outside in the park. So, and I keep telling him, no, it's not safe. Their schools are not open yet. Continued. It never stopped with that story, and that's the best part of these stories.
Hmm.
That it does not stop end of the story. It actually the conversation starts from there. And I found these storytellings to be very, very effective in having these kind of conversations.
I believe that your wife and your parents' role is very important in how we are nurturing and developing your kids. So, can you tell me more about how your family influenced this storytelling and nurturing your children and developing these beautiful stories?
Um, I think, I mean, it was, I mean, I grew up in a very typical, middle class family where, my mom was a housewife and, she would take care of us. And, my father, he was the eldest of 11 siblings.
Wow.
And we all grew up in like this small house where all of them literally were living under like one roof with,
Hmm.
that went on till I was in the 10th grade, I think.
Okay.
And so my father, he worked very hard to, give us all the opportunities that we needed and took care of his brothers and sisters as well. So, so those are all became part of my upbringing, part of my memories. And so it always, pulled me back into those things whenever I'm faced with a sort of a situation. I believe these all subconsciously gave me that kind of a thought process where there was so much for me to tell and to share with the kids and my experiences. And even now, I encourage my kids to actually call their grandparents and record the conversations. I
Oh
encourage
wow,
them to,
that's a good thing to do.
yeah, I encourage them to call them and ask them about what did you do when daddy did this? Or when you were a kid, did you do these kind of things that my dad does, or even I'm doing it? So I wanted them to get into their habit of getting stories even from their grandparents,
Hmm.
because you must have also noticed when we meet with our friends over a cup of tea or Friday night, we have so much to talk, be it politics, be it movies, be it sports. We don't stop talking. It's something very innate in us, very natural, that every one of us has this ability to tell stories.
Yeah, but I think, but storytelling is not natural, and not everyone can tell good stories. What can you advise to them? How can they tell good stories to their children?
Right. I'll tell you a little anecdote from my own life. I think back right after I finished my graduation, I applied for some MBA courses and I went to Symbiosis University to give my group discussion, because after I qualified for the written test,
Hmm.
and there were a people of the group of 11 people, and they gave us some topic which I don't remember now. and I could not utter a single word. Throughout that entire group discussion for 5 minutes, I did not utter a single word, to the point where the group moderator, the group discussion moderator said, "You want to add something to this conversation?" And I said, "No." Starting from that to now, where I'm telling stories to the kids, I don't think anybody, can be any worse than how I started out. So I sincerely believe that everybody has this ability to tell about their childhood, tell about that cricket game where they lost or where they won, or where they were the man of the match in that game. Everybody has these kind of stories to tell. Once you get into the habit, you will be surprised to see the reaction from the kids, and hopefully that reaction will give you more ideas. And my book is also sort of giving series of stories that I have told, giving the parents and even the kids, if they want to read these stories to the siblings, ideas about how to do this.
No, I think that's pretty important. And that's why I chose you as my human star today, because this is all about storytelling. And if you have your base, your children who are attuned to the social issues and causes right from the beginning, you have a great pyramid. So I think it's great that you are doing that. Is there any particular technique that you are using, or it is just like impromptu?
I mean, these are mostly impromptu, but the stories are always on what is currently happening around us. Uh, a very recent example, my daughter's best friend happens to be a Pakistani, and they both go to the same school. During the campaign, the election campaign that was happening, whenever there was campaign, the Republicans debate was on the TV, I used to turn down the volume, or I used to send the kids into a different room, because I did not want to hear all the harsh things that were being said in those debates. It so happened that this Pakistani friend of my daughter, she started crying in the school, and my daughter was called in because she was her best friend, and the student counselor said, "Why don't you spend some time?" Turns out that she was told by her friends about how one of the candidates, now the president, told about banning the Muslims. So she was scared. She didn't know how to react. So my daughter came to me and told that this has happened in the school. And I realized that while I was talking to her about all the social issues and everything, I was shielding her from these so-called political discussions, thinking that it is too immature for them. What I did not realize is they go to school, the kids there have access to all sorts of things, all sorts of information. So it is in our best interest to equip the kids with the best we can to understand, help them understand how to deal with these kind of issues. And that's why she came to the rescue.
No,
So I'm
I think I completely understand where you are coming from. One last question: has the
sure.
storytelling changed the storyteller?
Yeah, I think a lot. I think a lot. One thing that I also try to highlight in my book, which hopefully parents also do realize, is that in our daily life we get so sucked into this, mechanical sort of almost lifestyle. We feel like we're not spending enough time with the kids.
Hmm.
And this storytelling ritual happened to be like part of the daily life, and my kids demand that I tell them the stories. So in a way, it actually brought me closer to my kids. And even when I'm like, say, reacting for whatever reason, I'm angry at my kids or I'm shouting at them, the kids are like, very prompt, and they say, "But daddy, you told me in that story that you should not do this." So in a way, it is also being used on me directly in a way to sort of teach me also the same lessons that I told them as part of the storytelling. So in a way, it also made me a lot more conscious and a lot more, definitely closer to my kids.
No, yeah, I completely again relate to that. Thank you so much for coming and joining me today on this episode. Viewers, if you want to buy this book, the Kinder version, is available on Amazon.com. Go to dayoutwith.com and order your book today. Uh, we have provided the link on the website, so it's just $8, and I think it's like a treasure house of so much of good information that you will celebrate reading the book and working through it. Thank you, Suresh. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, CK. Thank you very much for the wonderful opportunity. It was great talking to you.